Hello, Asa, mate. How are we,
Hi,
buddy?
I'm good, pal. Nice to see you from the other side of the world.
I know. I always ask if I speak to anyone in UK, how's the weather?
It's rubbish, mate. It's absolutely rubbish. It's like non-stop rain for weeks here. Oh,
Mate, I don't want to
you
rub it
know,
in, but I've just been playing volleyball before I came in on the
well,
beach. It
shut
was
up.
beautiful, beautiful day, beautiful day.
And you know what'll happen here? What'll happen here is we've had non-stop rain, but as soon as the sun comes out for 2 days, they'll say hose pipe ban.
Yeah, the usual. I know, mate. I remember those days. Well, look, listen, thanks for coming on, mate. And I just thought I'd call out first a very kind of strange but beautiful way that we met. When I remember when you came, obviously last year I lost my dad,
Yeah,
and a lot of people will be aware of that. But I remember you coming into our family home with my mum, and you brought your warm presence and real kind of authentic way that you kind of were there. And you kind of almost felt like you'd known us for years, how you did it, and I really appreciated how you did that, how you carried yourself, and how you made that. We almost had a bit of a laugh when we were talking, and I think that's the way it should be. So, the fact that we're now talking, I just when you were going through stuff, I thought this is a guy who I really connect with, and straight away I thought I would love to get to know you a little bit deeper and see what's going on. And since I've been following you, and there's lots of stuff going on in your world, so thanks for coming on, my friend, and obviously people can understand that's how we met. So what I like to do, Asa, is just ask people a little bit of just describe who was little Asa, and what made the man in front of me today. I like to understand a little bit about your background as a child and your ups and downs and what's brought you to where you are today, if you wouldn't mind, my friend.
yeah. Well, I was born in Liverpool, not far from Liverpool's grounds, in a place called Kirkdale, which is smack bang in the. I was born next door to a pub, actually, which is still there and very well known. I'm one of seven children, and
Wow.
I'm from what I would describe as a Liverpool Irish family. So my relatives came over from Ireland in the late 1800s, settled in Liverpool, and that's where my family origins come from. So I was born and raised in the Kirkdale area, with, like I said, a big family. I've got six brothers, one sister, fantastic relationship with all my siblings, and yeah, I had a good childhood in that respect. School wasn't great for me, I'll be perfectly honest, because I went to a very rough school where it was basically a daily case of kill or be killed. So it wasn't great. The education for someone like me who struggled with things like maths and things like that, couldn't come to terms with it, but was okay with things like English and music. But I don't think they realised at the time that, as we know now, there are certain strengths in certain areas, and mine certainly wasn't in stuff like mathematics and stuff like that. So I struggled a lot, to be honest. Couldn't quite find my feet. But when I left school, it quickly became apparent that, like, obviously I had a musical talent. So through circumstances, I was able to sort of walk down that path, but not straight away. I started off just normal jobs when I left school, and then later on in life, circumstances changed, and I was able to do what I love now, which is, I'm a professional musician and a writer, and obviously, as with the way we met, we'll get into that a little bit later on. But yeah, but that's sort of my younger origins in Liverpool, knocking around the streets of Kirkdale with me mates and stuff like that.
And you talk around that because obviously I'm from Liverpool, and still got a house in Kirby, and it can be a tough upbringing depending on where you are, and schools you can get involved in fighting and this, that, and the other. How was that for you? Was that like, was it a tough go for you? Were you getting involved in fights? Did you get bullied? Were you bullying? How was your upbringing?
No, I was in, yeah, there was fights. I can remember. I remember having a paper round and getting a good hiding on me paper round once by a group of lads. But that then led to sort of retaliation. Then later on, in the local park, there was little skirmishes and stuff like that. But what I will say, there was never any instances of like people stabbing each other or none of what's going on now. where young lads are going out with a wallet, the keys, and a knife. You know, all that lark.
It was just
It
old
was
school.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, all skirmishes and stuff like that. But most of the time, to be honest with you, I spent in the local park playing football, just hours and hours. We'd go in, come home from school, have our tea, straight to the park, so that literally you couldn't see the ball. It was that dark.
I
And
remember
so
it,
that's
mate.
how I spent most of my childhood, was just with me mates and my brothers kicking a ball. The bullying side of things, no, because I'm from a large family. And so, you know, we looked after each other. And bullying was never in my psyche because I was raised well. My dad was a really good man with good principles, and he would not have had that. If you know, if it had been brought to his attention that any of us were bullying anyone, he'd have probably given. We don't do it these days. He'd probably given us a smack on the back of the head. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so I wasn't raised that way. You know, just really, yeah, just getting on with your life in Liverpool at the time, and you
And
know,
so you found school difficult in fact of learning because it wasn't suited to you. I mean, I must admit myself, I found a way to get through school and did okay, but I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like learn that well. I still to this day I struggle to just read stuff and digest it unless it really excites me. I learn in talking and visually and stuff like that much more
yeah.
how I work. And you're right, schools need to really adapt to that. Now, what was it like for you? You talked about your family. Sounds like you had a close knit. I know Kirkdale's a bit rough, you know what I mean? But you had a close knit family.
Yeah.
How did you transition into your teenage years? Because obviously, I know I went a bit off the rails with regards, partying, drinking, weekend
Mm.
vendors and all that. Did you go down that path from your transition into teenage into early 20s?
No, no, it was more for me because when I was in my late teens, I sort of discovered music then. So a couple of my mates, I was at a party in Liverpool, and a couple of my mates were playing guitars and singing, and I sort of made my way over and sat with them and joined in. And then one of the older fellas in the band approached me and said, "You've got a good voice, do you want to audition for our band?" So, and the funny thing was, he said, "We're auditioning tomorrow for a new singer at the house. Bring some ale." I was only like 17, 16, 17. I went along anyway, auditioned for the band, and I became their singer. So to be honest with you, that sort of took over my life then more than anything. Wanting to play the guitar, get better, sing. Was with the band, we were doing local gigs and stuff like that. And then later on in life, it became serious for me when I was able to sort of think this is actually going to be a career for me, because I was in a couple of dead end jobs I didn't enjoy. I was getting no satisfaction out of them. I think I had a job. One job was filling vending machines, putting like chocolate and Coke and crisps in vending machines. I had some terrible jobs, and I knew I am not going to spend my life doing this. You know what I mean? I went for a job interview once thinking it was at the shop, and he gave me a spray can and a scraper. And I said, "What's that for?" And he said, "There's loads of chewing gum on the floor. The job is you go around, spray it and scrape it off." And I just, there's got to be something better than this. And so, later on, circumstances changed for me through a quirk of my wife being a hairdresser in Liverpool, playing a demo CD in the shop she was working in. And the fella whose hair she was cutting owned a restaurant. And he said to her, "Who's that?" And she said, "That's my husband." She said, "Tell him to come and see me, I'll give him a gig." And at the time, I was filling vending machines. And
Wow.
that's how it happened for me. I did this gig, then I got a little local play on Radio Merseyside in Liverpool, and things just took off for me. And within a matter of months, I became a professional entertainer, and I have
Wow.
been for the last, I think it's 23 years now.
Wow. And being in that entertainment space and going around, obviously doing what you should be doing, your passion, your purpose, your calling, whatever. If it can, to have that is such a wonderful gift and to find and live. How have you found it? Because obviously in the entertainment space, it is can be a bit all over the place. I would assume there's a lot of partying and stuff like that
Yeah,
goes with that. Have you managed to stay on the straight and narrow through all that time? Have you had any bumpy
yeah.
rides? How's it been?
Well, I think you've got to be honest. For me, what happened with me was I started down that road where I felt having a drink was a normal procedure after a gig. even occasionally having one before. You know, there was the whole thing of, you know, Dutch courage, have one before you go on. And I quickly discovered that I had an addictive personality. And I'm one of those people who's always been all or nothing. I also, I think, felt I craved acceptance a little bit. So, you know, the drinking would be something that everybody did. And and I was always a very happy person after a drink. I was never a narc, never got in any fights, any trouble. I was the opposite. I was the fella who'd be climbing a lamppost at the end of the night to make everyone laugh. You
You
know?
and me both.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, the stuff, you know, I cringe to think some of the stuff I've done, you know. And so, yeah, I have to be honest and hold my hands up that drink became a part of my life, and it took over a little bit, where I started getting this mentality that if I worked hard at the weekend, my reward should be a bender or drink. And so it started creeping in and affecting my life, my home life and relationship with my wife, my children. It became a problem, to the point where probably 5 years ago, something like that, I had to face up to this and say, look, there's an issue here. I don't know how much, you know, it is in families. Certainly with my family, with the Irish side of the family, there's been a lot of alcoholism in the family. My dad's father was an alcoholic. Two of his brothers died through alcoholism. So there was a lot of um, drink culture. And as you know as well, mate, the drink culture in Liverpool's massive. It's like,
Oh,
you know, at the weekend, everyone's like, come on, let's get on it. Let's get on the ale and other stuff these days. That never interested me. I never touched any of that. It was a pint of Guinness for me, which became my go-to. And yeah, I had to face up to it. And so I did. I made a conscious decision to stop drinking. And I tried different things, didn't work for me. And then in the end, to be honest with you, I did the 12 steps, and that worked. And I still do it. I still do it to this day. You know, sort of like relying on what I class as my higher power, which is different for everyone. But attendance at AA meetings for me became a must, because I found myself in an environment of non-judgmental people who knew my story, and suddenly the penny dropped, and I thought, "Oh, this is a universal problem, and you've got to
you know,
face up
yeah,
to it."
beautifully said there. It is a universal problem, and the thing that I talk to, and I've talked to, you know, some amazing people who've usually come from the depths of pain and now want to help people, you know. And if I look at you, somebody who has got a gift, has kind of almost found his way to live that gift, and you're doing it right, but still you're encountering some problems in there. You know,
Yeah.
people go, "Oh, I would love to have done that." You know, there'd be many people who have gifts, you know, or similar to yours, but have never made it to the level that you have, where you're on stage, you're doing these things, and you're still struggling because
Oh,
we
100%. Yeah.
we all do. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter where you are in life. We encounter our battles, and you know, for somebody in your position, people will think, wow, you know, even he's got to that position, but was struggling. What was the tipping point for you? How did it get really kind of dark for you? Where was this an
Oh,
everyday
yeah.
thing where you were drinking? Did it get really, you know, challenging?
Well, yeah, I realised that I was also a person who was prone to depression, and the depression was brought on by the drinking and anxiety and, you know, feelings of worthlessness and stuff like that. But it was always brought on by the drinking, and I would go through really dark periods of depression where I struggled, couldn't sort of like come to terms with why, because on the surface of it, I was walking on stage and entertaining people. You know, I was doing amazing gigs and stuff like that, but then still struggling personally. It's like the old thing, tears of a clown. I could be at the side of the stage really struggling and thinking, you know, I don't feel right in myself, in my head, and then I've got to walk on stage and jazz hands, you know what I mean? So that was the tough. Yeah, it did get, being perfectly honest, for me, got really bad for me, to the point where I thought I was going to lose me relationship, I was going to lose my family, and I had to make a decision that it was more important to get my mental health. So what I did was, for a period, I had a very, very good friend here in Liverpool. I'll say his name, guy called Davey Edge. And he sort of stepped in because he's in the music business. And he basically said to me, look, come and stay with me for a little bit. Let's get you straight.
What a guy.
And that's what he did. And so what I did was, and my wife, by the way, was 100% behind it. She was amazing. I went and I stayed with him. And this was in an environment where it was a house where there was no alcohol, no drugs. No one was allowed to come in that house at all. The only people who came to the house were other recovering people, and people who we would sit round in the morning and talk about, like, how we were going to get through the day, what our problem with alcohol was. And suddenly, again, this community appeared of people who are struggling mentally but supporting each other. And I think the conversation we've had, and a lot of your podcasts that I've watched subsequently since we met, now sort of inspire you that there's a whole community out there who are willing to be honest and say, yeah, I'm struggling mentally, I have issues, but I'm willing to talk about them. And the second you start doing that, it's like somebody's taken a heavy wet coat off you. If you've ever come in out the rain and you've got a soaking wet coat on, the best thing is to take it off. Talking about your mental health and sitting with other people who are honest and say, you know what, this is my story. And suddenly you go, oh my goodness. It's like taking that coat off. The meetings I go to, I come home and I say to my wife, I never reveal anything because it's anonymous. But what I say to her is, the guy or the lady who shared their story tonight was just incredible stories of human beings who've changed their life and become what they're meant to be, and this thing that held them back due to whatever reason. I'm not judging it, because some people say it's a disease, other people say it's not, it's learned behaviour. I don't care. The issue is, as long as you're getting help and you've got someone to talk to, you can get through it. That's the answer to that. So yeah, things did get really dark for me. I can remember being, feeling suicidal, having moments where I was on my own, thinking, I just can't be doing. I've had enough of this. I just have had enough of it. And there was moments where I was going to go down that path, but then things would bring me back to reality. My wife, my kids, and then realizing I needed to address it. And thankfully I did. I did address it. And these days, as long as I stick to the program and I don't suddenly think I'm okay now, I need to recognize that I need to keep working on myself. Because if you work on yourself, the reverberations of that affect everybody around you.
Wow, that's courageous and brave. Thank you for sharing that. And you're right. I believe when people do step in and they do share, I think it's the epitome of courage. I
Yeah,
think it's so fucking brave. And it's like, for me, the minute I see someone being vulnerable and real, it's like there's no mask with them. And I feel an instant connection to that person. I think this person's fucking real. Because there's so many people who are fake out there, right? Not that they're fake, they're performing because they're existing in all these different relationships, yeah, and being someone that they think that person wants them to be.
yeah.
But like, I'm not no interest in that, and I feel like a lot of people I'm engaging with, they're real. They've been through the depths of pain, and they're beautiful human beings. And as you said, for whatever reason, it might be because they were traumatized as a child. It might just be an addictive problem that they've had, or something's triggered something. But usually they've been through the pain, and now they've come up the other side, and they really want to help people. So yeah, and I think there's a real strong community there. You're right. Um, so for you, once you got to that kind of space and awareness, and I think it again, I say for somebody in your space, none of us are none of us are absolved of this. None of us are, we haven't got this innate protection from mental health. At any given day, it can creep up on you. I've said many times when I came back from the UK, which we'll talk about in a sec. Obviously, my dad's passing. I thought, I think I've got through this okay, not affecting me. And then all of a sudden, bang! I
Yeah.
just, I just felt, I was like, one day I was like, I don't want to get out of bed. I just
Yeah,
wanted to get
yeah,
under the covers and say, piss off world. And I was like,
yeah,
what's this? And then I started feeling this like weight in my chest, heaviness. And I was like, what's this? I just hadn't processed stuff. I hadn't worked through the stuff. And it caught
yeah,
up with me. And here's me thinking I'm doing all my things. And I'm like, it got me, you know?
yeah.
None of us are immune to it, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
where did you go from that space then? You know, you're aware, you were at the depths, you know, and you said, you know, I'm gonna work on this, and you started. You did go through the program. Did you then find a bit of foundation? Did you, steady your feet, and how did you get back into that, better mental space that you're kind of in today?
Because I was given this book by the chap who runs the group I attend, and it was called Living Sober, and it's also an audio book, by the way, like a podcast. And every day I listen to that in my car. If I'm driving around, if I'm going to visit a family, and there's chapters every day. There was one I was being listening to called "Live and Let Live," and it's analysing that expression, like where we can become irritated by people or things, and the expression, well, you know what, live and let live. But it broke it down to the two parts of that expression: live and let live. So if people are doing stuff that's starting to mess with your mental health and it's annoying you, well, let live. Just let them get on with it. Don't let it bother you. And the live bit is you. So you concentrate on yourself. Do the things that you need to do to get through the day. And as regards what other people are doing, I think this is applicable to people who have got drug and alcohol problems, because what they can do is they can start resenting other people who drink, and resenting them, thinking, oh, look at them doing that. They shouldn't be doing that. But they haven't got your problem. So what you've got to do is let live. Let them do that. Let them do whatever, and you concentrate on yourself. And there's wonderful things like there's a great expression called the Irish goodbye. And what that means is if you're at a party or an event and suddenly things are starting to become too much for you, go. Don't go round saying to everyone, I'm going, bye. Because what happens is in Liverpool, they're like, where are you going, lads? Yeah, get a bevy down you. Get a bevy down you. And you're like, I don't want to. So do the Irish goodbye. Just go.
Smoke
And then what
bomb.
happens is no one's bothered. Later on, they'll say, what happened to you? And you said, oh, you know what? I had to get off. And they'll go, it's called the Irish. So I practice that now. If I feel I'm in a situation where maybe other people are drinking and it's starting to pressurize me, I just go and let live, let other people get on with what they're doing and work on yourself. So that's sort of where I am now, and every day I try to listen to something and convince me, tell myself the truth that I'm a better functioning human being when I'm straight, focused. I'm not allowing other things to interfere with my goals and my happiness. And to be honest with you, mate, it's changed my life. It really has. I'm focused with what I do. As we were chatting offline before we chat, all these different hats we have, jobs, and in my life now, it's changed significantly. Where I'm not just singing. I'm still singing, but I'm doing other stuff. So throughout the week, I'll look at my day and go, right, that's what I'm doing today. And when I get to the end of the day and I've accomplished those things, that's good enough for me. I mean, you don't have to worry about this where you are. I'll put the fire on.
I put the aircon on.
I'll put the, I'll put the fire on, put the telly on, sit with me wife or me kids, whatever, and just say, right, that's it. That's all I need. That's all I need in life now. I don't need to go over to the pub and say I deserve a load of Guinness down me. I don't. I'd rather watch something on the telly, pick me guitar up. I have a different reward structure now as well. Whereas it used to be a few bevies, now it's playing me guitar or going for a nice meal
that,
or
that,
other
uh,
stuff.
that's a real beautiful thing, and I'm quite interested in that, because there's a few other questions I'd ask you. But what you've just described there is, you talked about the reward structure. I've achieved these things in the week, and what I've found out now, I've never had a drink problem. I used to party in the UK, go on the 2-day benders and do all that stuff.
Yeah.
when I came over here, I made a conscious decision like 10, 11 years ago that was going. So I stopped partying. I'd just like, I'd go out on a Friday, Saturday, and I'd still get pissed, 6 or 7 pints, 8 pints, but I was never an alcoholic. I was a
Yeah,
social drinker, but I would give it a nudge. And then over the
yeah,
years, I slowed that down from, 10 pints to 6 pints to 5 pints. But I've been helping a couple of guys out and a couple of men who've stopped and they've inspired me. I've said, well, why do I need it? And they started bringing that question to me. Well, I like it, and it was that reward structure. Well, it's at the weekend. What do I do?
yeah,
And I've
yeah,
still, so I don't very rarely drink now. I might have a couple of pints here and there, every month or something like that. But I still have this trigger on like a Saturday at 5 o'clock
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
creeps in, and it's like, oh, and I almost have to get past that couple of hours. And then
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I'm not going to drink now. Number one,
yeah.
what the hell is that? And number
Yeah.
two, do you still experience any of that?
Yeah, Ian, I do it in a little bit. I think sometimes, again, when you're surrounded by it, social media, it'll pop up on your social media, won't it? It's Friday, and someone will post a picture of like a pint or ale, and you're suddenly like, oh, I remember those days,
Yeah.
yeah, look at that. But then I also do the thing of playing the tape forward, where I think, okay, yeah, if I decide to go down that road again and have a load of ale, play the tape forward to where it'll be. I'll be doing forward rolls down Matthew Street in Liverpool in my underpants.
You
That's
go all in.
oh yeah, that's the crazy Murphy. That's the that side of me comes out, and it could quite easily come back where. And I've got this little mate, my sound man, little Ken, been my mate for like 20 odd years, best mate, well longer than that. And he's only little, and I'm like, all your lads, all our family are all the giants. So like I'm 6'1", and he's only about 5'2", and I'd start bevying, and I couldn't half put it away. And he'd get to a point and he'd say, "Can we stop now? I'm full up." And he used to do that. I'm full, and I used to go, "No, another one." And he'd be like, "Oh, I can't drink anymore." And I'd be like, "You're staying here with me, you bastard," and all that. And I think back now, it was terrible. Because I could, 10 pints for me was no problem, 10 pints of Guinness, a couple of little Jamesons, and I was away. So, yeah, I now sort of get to the reward structure thing and think, right, okay, yeah, you have worked hard this week. But I also say, so what over a lot of other people? My wife works really, really hard. She doesn't do that, never has done.
Wow.
She's one of those people, who can balance her drinking quite easily. She'll have a couple of glasses of wine, but she won't drink 3 bottles. So, my reward structure now is completely different. It's like, maybe getting up in the morning, going for a nice breakfast, or going for I really love going for meals, stuff like that. I enjoy
Yeah.
my football, my fitness, so I just changed the structure.
Yeah, it's really interesting that. So what you're describing for people who are struggling, because I know a lot of women struggle with that thing when they stop. It's like it comes to the weekend, it comes to that time, and
Yeah,
I've just been ingrained in me for so long. It's like they can be okay on a Friday, and then the problem starts. And I think what you're
exactly.
just describing there is strategically and play it out in your mind. What is my new reward structure? Is what you're saying,
Yeah,
and because I was asked a question by someone. I had a meeting last week, and he kind of said, "Oh, you eat well, you do this, you don't really drink. What do you do?" He kind of saying, "What do you do for fun?" And I'm like,
yeah,
"It is
yeah, yeah.
fun." I said,
That's it.
"I
Yeah,
said, I said, I'm up at 5:30. I'm watching the
yeah,
sunrise. I'm walking. I'm
yeah,
going to the gym. I'm having a dip." And at 5:30 in the morning, when the sunrise, and it smells different. It looks
yeah,
different. It's a
yeah,
different
yeah,
energy that a lot of people won't speak. And I said, I fucking love that. And I don't want to
yeah,
give that up
yeah,
like that I used to. I'd be sitting in bed till 12 o'clock and eating shit and doing all that, and
yeah,
then I'd be back in the gym on a Monday or Tuesday, and then I'd off switch at the weekend. That is fun
yeah.
for me, getting up in the morning, experiencing that, and listening to the birds and doing all
Yeah.
that. It's a different thing, right?
Don't you think as well that the reward is in how you look physically?
Oh,
Because like you
100%.
look, you looked at, you looked the picture of health, and there's a reason for that because you're up, you're eating well, you're fit. like, because I don't drink anymore now, and I'm in the, I picked me boxing up again. So that's what I'm, after I've spoke to you, I'm going straight to the gym. I'll do 10 rounds this
Yeah,
morning. And
you
then
with me, mate. You're with Lee Sayers, aren't you?
Lee Sayers, yeah, I go down there.
Tell him I said hello.
I go down there and batter him. I
Give him a
wish.
clip.
I give him a clip, yeah. So I do that, and and the thing is, when I was drinking, I remember my wife saying to me, I'd been on a 3-day bender or something, and she said, "You look absolutely dreadful." She said, "You look awful." And then when I stopped drinking, I remember she made a comment to me after I stopped drinking. It was a while, and she said to me, "You look great." She said, "Your eyes have gone back to the colour they were, instead of this terrible, blade red eyes and all that, and tired, and your skin's terrible." And for me, there's a reward in such. If you can invest in yourself, and things like drinking and drugs and mental health, invest in yourself. Part of the reward structure is how you look and feel, because suddenly you start. I've had friends and relatives, by the way, who've gone on periods of stop drinking for periods, and honestly, the physical difference after 3 months is unbelievable. It's unbelievable with some of them, and they've come here and they've said, "Oh, do you know, I haven't had a drink for 3 months," and I'm like, "Yeah, you can tell.
Wow.
You look great." And I think when people are struggling with mental health problems, drug issues, alcohol, I think it's important that we do that when they're making that effort and they're starting to win. Is that we constantly give them that needed encouragement by saying, "You look great. You're doing brilliant." And I think what I find with the program that I attend as well, I've been there when people have come in on the first day, yellow. Some of them look like Homer Simpson, shaking, and then after 6 months, it's like a different human beings in the room.
Wow.
Their eyes are bright, their skin is amazing, they're mentally switched on. They're now part of the program. They're sharing, because at the end, what happens with an AA meeting is that you have a guest speaker who tells you their story, and it's incredibly inspiring. And then we have a little break, cup of tea, and then everyone shares. So someone will say, "My name is such and such, and this is how my week's been, and I got through it this way." And I sit there and you listen to all these people who are human beings who are getting through their week, and they're saying, like, for example, like yourself, you lost your dad. I lost my dad a year ago, and I really struggled with that. What you just said then resonated with me. I thought I'd coped with it, and then suddenly realised I hadn't, and things were happening on a daily basis, and it was killing me. And going to those meetings and hearing other people talk about getting through their week helped me a lot. You know what I mean? With the grief process of thinking, the actual funeral service is not the grief process. That just helps us get through that difficult day of saying goodbye. What follows subsequently is the process of dealing with what I refer to as the void. So when we've got our parents or our loved ones, even if they're ill, they're still physically there. Once the void steps in, that's when we struggle, because we can't physically be with that person anymore, interact with them, stuff like that. So, yeah, I just think that part of things, the talking and dealing with things in that way is massive, Ian.
Yeah, I think we just, it's almost like, unfortunately, grief is the price of love.
Yeah, definitely.
It's like if you love deeply, unfortunately, at some point you're going to grieve, um, and yeah, what you just described there. I'd like to get into that in a second with you, while because I'd like to talk about what you do now, but just to kind of close off what we were talking about there with, if do you think that a lot of people with their mental health, because a lot of people don't perceive alcohol to be a drug, they're
Mm,
drinking, and I don't think they realize the effects it's having on their mental health, would be my
yeah.
take. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say you've hit the nail on the head. I don't think a lot of people realize the effects alcohol has on you afterward. For me, it was always anxiety, depression, and feelings of worthlessness, feelings of regret, feelings of shame for things I'd done or said, and sometimes wasn't even aware of. You know what I mean? And then I would worry about that afterward, become very withdrawn and quiet because I felt ashamed of my behaviour. So 100% affects people's mental health. You know, again, I look around at people who go on, say they go on a massive bender. I guarantee most of them the next day won't feel great mentally because they'll think, things happen. Don't forget, when people are under the influence of alcohol, things that are going well can suddenly take a very bad turn, for no particular reason other than the fact that alcohol impairs people's normal behaviour. So things can happen, and then the next day, people are dealing with the aftermath of that, which would affect their mental health because they've fallen out with people. They've done things, that they've got to apologise for. So for me, the correlation between alcohol abuse and mental health is massive. And if people are struggling with their mental health, my advice to them would be don't drink. It's anyone who's got an issue with drugs or anything like that, they cannot drink. You can't fool yourself and say, yeah, I've got mental health issues or I've got a drug problem of another type, but I can still drink. You can't, because it's a mind altering substance which changes you mentally and physically. So you cannot be on a straight and narrow, trying to sort yourself out mentally, physically with other addictions if you are drinking alcohol. You just can't do it. Sadly, there's some of us in this world that alcohol doesn't work for. And you have to hold your hands up and admit it. There are those who are okay with it. And they're fine. And they get through life with no issues. They can have a little glass of wine, a pint of beer with the mate, walk out the pub. There are others who don't. And they're usually the ones, by the way, who do suffer with their mental health issues. So if they really want to get themselves sorted out, so their mind is completely free of everything and they're able to experience the things that will help them become mentally stable, take alcohol out of the equation.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, mate. I couldn't agree more. And people think that they're okay with drink, but they don't realize the chemical imbalance is chipping away at you. And
Yeah,
it's reduced, it's affecting your dopamine levels. It's like
yeah,
you're gonna get anxiety, you're gonna get all these things, and it's like, it's that scientific chemical thing that's going on inside your body that you're not aware of and you don't want to look at. So that point you just made, if you are suffering mental health, cut it out. See how that
yeah,
works. Do that.
yeah,
Try that one first. Stop doing that and watch what happens for a start one. And you do touch on there about shame and problems. And I always say in a relationship, if you're going through a problem, cut the drink. Because if you've got a problem with your missus and you have the drink together, it's gonna go fireworks, right? So remove that.
100%. Yeah, yeah,
And yeah, because I've been there, I've done it, and I know there's a couple of people close to me. You probably know a couple of them, and when they get on the drink, they get angry. Even a certain level of piss, they get angry. And then
yeah,
it's
yeah,
fucking,
yeah,
let's go. Who wants it?
yeah,
You know what I mean? And then it just, so I just say, cut it out to give yourself an opportunity if you're feeling like shit. So, no, it's a really good point. Now, you talk about grief, and obviously we go back to, how we met. You looked after my dad's funeral. You engaged with us beforehand. It was a beautiful process, and I thank you for how you managed that for the family. Thank you. Um, but yet it was a as good as it could be on the day, but yet
mm,
grief, you're around grief a lot. And a lot of people struggle with grief, and a lot of men don't talk anyway. And I don't necessarily talk a lot about, I do now because of the conversations that people I'm interacting with, but I felt like shit for a period of
mm,
time and I didn't know why, and I almost doubted it, and I was doubting myself. Do I? Don't I? Should I? Is this right? I shouldn't feel like this. My mum's over there suffering far more than me, and my brothers were around it, and I only came in and come out, and I was like, I was doubting it all. I was going through this like mental merry-go-round in my head, but I
Mm.
was just struggling, and so I actually put a few social media posts up just to force myself to talk about it because
Yeah, yeah.
I was affected. Then a couple of people reached out to me, and then I started talking. I was thinking, okay, but what's your thoughts? You touched on it briefly about that grieving process because that can catch a lot of men out. It can catch a lot of women out that it can then lead to drink, it can lead to drugs, it can lead to the spiral because you can be all good and then something like that happens and you're on shaky ground again. But aside
Mm.
from the drink, it's a massive problem for mental health and it can really, really affect people. So in all of the work that you do, what's your thoughts on grief and how best to process that?
Um, yeah, it's a really interesting one, that, because the point you made before, if we didn't, yeah, grieve deeply, obviously we love deeply. That's them; they're very closely linked. Um, I think that the grief process certainly begins after we've had the funeral. So we lose our loved ones, we deal with the pain of that. Then we have the funeral, and we sort of think, "Oh, that's it now." We walk out and go, "Bye, Dad. You know, miss you." And then you don't realise that it's at some point it's like someone's come behind you and hit you on the back of the head with a cricket bat. That's how I would describe it, and that's what happened with me. I had a weird experience, because after my dad died, I had to go on tour for 2 months with a show I'd written with Ricky Tomlinson called Irish Annies, and we were on like 40 theatres around the country, and we were staying in hotels, and got up one morning to have me breakfast, looks across the room, and there's a fella who was the double of my old fella.
Wow.
Right, to translate that, that's Dad in Scouse.
Yeah.
There's a fellow who looked the image of me dad, and I almost fainted. I couldn't believe it. I was looking at him. I couldn't stop staring at him. Everything about him was, I thought, and I was looking, and you know what I did? I went up to him and I spoke to him.
Wow.
I don't know. I just said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but do you know you are?" I said jokingly, "You've never been to Liverpool, have you, or Ireland?" And he went, "No." He said, "I said you." I showed him a picture of my dad on my phone. He said, "Oh my goodness," he said, "I must have a long lost brother." But it was weird because it really affected me because we said before the void, so I could no longer physically see my dad, talk to him, be with him. And when I saw this fella, it hit me. I'll never see my dad again. And it was tough. It was that physical loss hit me then. It was tough, and I think that's when you cope with the grief afterward. So I think the thing is you need to then be around people who have been through the same thing and can help you. My wife had been through it. She lost her mum 15 years ago, and she's had to go through it, and as time went by, the cliche, it gets easier. It doesn't, because last week, it was a year since my dad died and 15 years since my wife's mum died, who was a fantastic woman. And I feel now her grief isn't any less than mine, just because it's 15 years and 1 year. It's still her mum. So she had to cope with that, and, still does, gets on with what she does, being a great mum and provide, household provider like myself. It's like a team thing. So the grief thing, I certainly think we definitely need to help each other more. The whole thing of like you've got to get through it. It's natural. We all, yeah, but it's incredibly painful. And as a celebrant as well, I see this, and I often say to the people while I'm with them, listen, what we're going to do on the day of your parents' or relatives' funeral will not be the end of this. So don't forget that you need to help and support each other after this. After the funeral's finished, remember to get together and support each other and help each other, because there are certain ones of you who really, really be struggling. And I found that with my brothers. Certain brothers in that, because like I say, there's 7 of us who were really, really struggling and, terribly, terribly upset on weeks and weeks after my dad's loss. couldn't cope with it because of how close we all were to me dad. And you the same. You know, your dad, as I know, obviously getting to know you and the family, amazing man who'd accomplished so much in his life. I mean, your dad's life could have been a movie. What he'd done, you know, in the police force and the amazing stories of his travel and his adventures and stuff like that, you know. My dad had a great life as well, you know. He came from poverty, my dad, living in a cellar in Liverpool 8 with his Irish parents, to ending up being a really successful fella in his own right, you know, becoming a joiner, building houses, you know, refurbishing houses, buying and selling them, and just being a really successful person and a morally successful person, by the way, which is more important, like your dad, good people with good morals, successful lives. You know, so the grief process, I think, needs to be addressed a lot more after the issue. So, you know, I sometimes think to myself now that I've been doing this 5 years as a celebrant, that maybe it's time for me to sort of start doing that a little bit and doing little things myself to say, look, I'm a celebrant, but here's my advice and my experience for after the funeral experience.
I think that's a good call, and I think that would help a lot of people. Myself included, just going through it and trying to learn through this, and especially for men who don't talk, it can be very, very daunting. I know my brothers are struggling. Our Chris and Andrew. I know they're
Yeah, yeah,
struggling.
yeah, yeah,
Massive. I know they are massively, and it's tough. And there's, I don't think there's any quick equation to it, but I think there's a way to soften the blow. And as you say,
that's a good way of putting it. Yeah,
being around people, knowing who to talk to, and to give yourself that leeway that this this
yeah.
is this is part of the process. So no, I think that's beautiful. What advice would you give to any kind of men out there who are struggling with any of the stuff that we've spoken about so far today, whether it be grief, drink, drugs, bad upbringing, but whatever it may be? What would be your advice? Because you touched on something there. What is a successful life? And I
Mm.
think that's a really important point to pause upon, because I think I believe that a lot of people get tangled up in their own head because they don't actually
Yeah,
understand. They don't actually understand what a successful life is, and they're battling against or for something that's not even what they fucking want.
yeah.
So, what would your advice be to someone to try and live that successful life, and what does that look like?
Well, a couple of things. I've got obviously now with the singing, but I've also over the last couple of years I wrote a couple of stage musicals which have gone on to do really well. One called Irish Annies, starring the UK actor. Well, he's a legend, Ricky Tomlinson.
He is a legend. The royal family. What a
Legend.
show!
Well, to be honest with you, Ian, I think we're coming over to Australia. Me and Ricky, we've been offered the opportunity to come over to Australia and do a series of evenings with about Ricky
Oh
Tomlinson's life
wow!
because he's got a huge following in Australia. So anyway, I've also just completed a brand new musical called Country Dreaming. In fact, there you
Wow!
go. There's the there's is a blatant plug, but there you go. That's it.
Oh,
Country
let's
Dreaming.
go! Wow!
So that's the new musical which will open in Liverpool on July the 5th. What it's all about is success and how society perceives success. Because we've been conditioned to say materialism is success. Big house, big car, loads of money. It's actually the opposite. When I do eulogies for families, they very rarely talk about materialism. They talk about memories, they talk about emotion, they talk about holidays, hobbies, funny stories. So basically, the key to this all is a successful life is doing what makes you happy and concentrating on the important things in life and not striving for materialism, because that'll only get you one thing: disappointment. Because there'll always be somebody who's got a bigger house than you, better car, and more money. So the point of the whole thing is, I always say, and there's a line in this musical where one of the characters does a big speech about success. You know what she says? Is the street sweeper a success? So the man who sweeps the streets and picks the rubbish up, is he a success? You might look at him and go, what's his job's rubbish? But if that man keeps his household, keeps his family happy, provides for them, goes home satisfied, he's a success. So that's the key to it all. Just look at what you're perceiving success to be. You might just have it completely warped and wrong. You might already, without even knowing it, be a massive success.
I love that. I
It's
love
true.
that. It's so true. No, I
Yeah,
love that.
you could already have got there. I look at it now and think, I've already got there. I've done it. I've got a job I love. I've got a nice home, a good family. I've got a job I absolutely love, and somebody pays me for it. So
Suckers.
basically, I'm Mo Salah.
Exactly, without the tan. No, mate, I love that. It's a beautiful way to end because there's some really good points there. But that thing, I genuinely believe that a lot of people's mental health is because they've got what success is all screwed up. And I
Yeah.
think it can be a lot simpler than it is. I think social media is a big problem for that.
Oh, massively, massive
It's a
problem.
massive, so that we could have a whole another hour on that.
Well, yeah. I mean,
But
again, just quickly, there's a song in Country Dreaming, and it's called "Filters on Faces," and it's all about people changing the perception of themselves on social media. Filters on faces, filters on places, filters on relationships given into the haters.
wow,
That's one of the lines from the song. There's one thing in life that I've found so far. Don't change a thing because you're fine as you are.
it's so apt for today's society. Those lines, mate,
Yeah.
so apt.
See, if I had a filter, I'd give myself a huge flowing mane of hair, you see. Yeah.
I could do with one of them.
And a tan like you.
Well, maybe when you come over to Oz, well, if you get over to Oz, I'll definitely be joining you. We'll have to catch up.
Oh,
And I've
that would
no
be
doubt.
great, mate. Yeah.
I've actually got my mum flying out on Wednesday. She's coming
Oh,
over here
lovely.
she's coming over here for a month anyway.
Well,
But look,
for all your viewers, I saw your mum the other day. She was coming past, and I was out walking the dog, and we had a long chat and a cuddle. We had a little hug and a chat and a laugh. And she's going through it obviously, but she was in good spirits, and we had a real laugh. To be honest, it was nice to see her.
she mentioned she thinks a lot of you, as we all do, and yeah, I just like to say thank you for the time. Thank you for looking after us. At that time when we went through me dad's loss, and I think we'll leave on that what you just described there about what success is. I think that was a really poignant thing to land on that a lot of people can take away. That using your words there, you might just find you're already successful. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
And that'll help you go through. All right, mate. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
You
you,
have a
Ian.
great day. Go and enjoy your
Yeah, you too,
boxing.
pal.
All right,
Thanks,
mate.
mate.
Cheers,
Ta-ra.
buddy. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.